Welcome back to the Nonsense Lullaby, where logic takes a back seat and dreams drive with no license. Tonight's story is called The Whispering Wallpaper, a detective tale that unravels reality like a badly folded road map. A mystery with no edges, suspects made of shadows, and clues that rearrange themselves when you blink. If you enjoyed tumbling into these strange worlds with us, like the video, subscribe to the channel and tap the bell so you never miss the next dose of beautifully bewildering bedtime chaos. This story is narrated by Wilson. Now, close your eyes, or don't, and prepare to wander.
Detective Melvin Slade hadn't meant to take the case. He was halfway through alphabetizing his collection of vintage doorknobs when a knock came at his third-floor window, which was peculiar since the building had no exterior stairwell and certainly no visitors scheduled for Thursday afternoons. Thursdays were reserved for hat-related emergencies only. The knock grew impatient. Slade opened the window to find a large owl holding a manila envelope in its beak. Without ceremony, it dropped the envelope and spiraled into the sky, shouting what may have been coordinates or simply an aggressive rendition of the alphabet backward. Inside the envelope, one Polaroid, one velvet thread, and a note scrawled in reverse cursive, "It hums when the moon forgets." Slade didn't need more than that. He packed his essentials: magnifying monocle, monocle magnifier, anti-clock, and 6 left gloves, and set off toward the last known address scribbled on the back of the photograph: Room 17.5, the Wicker House Hotel. No one had heard of it, including the taxi driver who claimed he didn't believe in hotels, period. Slade arrived by pigeon. The Wicker House loomed like a memory you're not sure is yours. The lobby was staffed by mirrors, each reflecting a different version of Slade, none of whom seemed glad to see him. He tipped one of them and made his way to room 17.5, which existed between floors. The elevator stopped at 17 and 18, but not between. To reach it, he had to hum the national anthem of a country that hadn't been invented yet and step sideways through the wallpaper. Inside the room, it was raining. Upward. Furniture floated toward the ceiling in slow, deliberate pirouettes. The wallpaper pulsed softly, in and out, like it was breathing. A voice murmured from its folds, saying things like, "The stapler knows," and "Rewind the carpet until it forgives you." Slade nodded. Standard procedure. He licked the velvet thread for latent vibrations. None. Squinted at the Polaroid, blank now, and placed the thread under his shoe. The floor lifted him 3 inches. The mystery had officially begun, or ended. The wallpaper giggled either way. Melvin Slade opened his eyes and found himself already halfway through his own footsteps. The hallway was breathing again, not heavily, but like it had something to confess. He stood still, or at least he tried to, but the floor was on its own schedule. Direction is just a suggestion, he reminded himself, adjusting his coat until it made a soft clicking noise, and nodded approvingly. All the light bulbs in the apartment had melted into delicate glass feathers during the night, and one by one they floated upward toward the carpeted ceiling, where gravity had apparently signed a resignation letter. He examined the wall. The wallpaper no longer whispered in words but in thoughts. Not his own. It exhaled phrases like "begin before the middle ends" and Keys are just promises pretending to be metal. Slade scribbled these onto the back of a receipt he found in his sock. The sock naturally objected. A door appeared on the east wall. That wasn't unusual. The east wall didn't exist yesterday. Inside the room was a chair facing away from him, spinning slightly in a circle that did not complete. As he approached, he realized the chair was occupied by static. Not a person, not an object, just static, like the kind you see on a forgotten television channel. The static turned to face him. "You're wearing the wrong time," it said. Slade didn't respond. He was busy listening to the vibrations in his left elbow. They were trying to spell something in Morse code, but kept spelling maybe. A typewriter on the floor began typing without keys. Each clack of the invisible letters echoed a memory he never had. The page filled up with maps of places that definitely couldn't exist, and architectural plans for buildings that might remember being built someday. The ceiling pulsed again. Water ran uphill. The carpet blinked. Slade reached into his coat and retrieved the object he didn't remember acquiring, a long strip of transparency film covered in fingerprints. He held it to the wall. The wallpaper hissed and then began to sing a low drone in a language made entirely of shadows. He nodded. That part made sense. Then a mirror appeared where his thoughts were. He looked into it. But instead of seeing his reflection, he saw a desk drawer opening and closing on its own. In a room filled with paper birds trying to escape a typewriter ribbon. "Of course," he muttered, "the syntax is recursive." He wrote that down, too, though the pen insisted on drawing triangles instead. With no doors, no sky, and no gravity willing to commit, Slade walked diagonally into the nearest corner, hoping it might be a portal in disguise. As he touched it, the corner folded inward like a memory collapsing. Behind it, a hallway shaped like a question mark, tiled in blinking eyes. Slade stepped forward. He didn't know whether he was dreaming, unraveling, or both. But the wallpaper was getting louder. Detective Slade stepped into the hallway that had unfolded from the corner. A corridor so crooked it was shaped like a melted trombone laid across a Mobius strip. It pulsed with an echo that hadn't happened yet. The eyes on the tiles blinked in spiraling unison, not randomly, not rhythmically, in a language. As he passed each blink, the hallway whispered its own name, but it changed it every time. "I am corridor. I am disagreement. I am the concept of maybe." He walked faster, but the floor unrolled beneath his feet like a typewriter ribbon spewing silent vowels. At one point, he passed himself walking the opposite direction. Only that version of himself was 6 inches taller, dressed in velvet smoke, and reading from a book made entirely of doorknobs. "Stop!" Slade yelled at his taller self. His echo responded, "The chapter you're in hasn't been invented yet," then disappeared into a fold in the air, which zipped itself shut with the sound of a fax machine apologizing. Slade rounded a corner that led into an absence. Not a room, not a void, just absence. There was no color, no shape, no time. Just the gentle hum of a faxed idea. He threw a pencil into the nothing. It returned as a compass, spinning wildly and pointing toward regret. Behind him, something flickered. A door labeled "Not an Exit" in bold, confident braille. As he approached, the door whispered, "I remember being locked once." The handle was made of questions, and it turned with uncertainty. Inside, the room was exactly like a memory he didn't remember forgetting. A desk, A rotary phone ringing but not vibrating. Shelves stacked with clocks that ticked backward, sideways, then recited poetry. The wallpaper here had peeled away, and underneath it was more wallpaper, layers deep. Thousands of voices murmured in flattened Latin and unfinished haiku. In the center of the room was a mirror that didn't reflect. It replayed. It replayed moments that hadn't happened yet. Slade saw himself holding a shoelace and questioning a giraffe. He saw himself lost in a storm made of punctuation. He saw his coat deciding to leave without him. He blinked. The mirror melted. Suddenly, the desk drawer opened by itself. Inside, a single paperclip bent into the shape of a city skyline and a photograph of a squirrel shaking hands with a cassette tape. That meant something, but not yet. The rotary phone rang once more. He picked it up. There was no sound, just a sense of something watching. Not malevolent, not benevolent, just aware. A voice finally spoke. But it wasn't a voice. It was a geometry. "You are near the answer," it said in triangles. "Which question?" Slade asked. But the phone had turned into a spool of ribbon, and the ribbon whispered, "Don't let the wallpaper tell you who you are." Then the floor dropped upward, the clocks sneezed, and the room turned itself inside out with the grace of a magician folding reality like laundry. Slade fell sideways, landing in a forest of chandeliers, each one humming the theme song to a show that never aired. He stood up, dusted off his shoes, and blinked. The wallpaper was still whispering, now from the insides of trees, and the trees were watching him back. Detective Slade awoke, if you could call it that, face down in a pond made entirely of expired warranties. Above him, the clouds were arguing over whose turn it was to be the moon. He stood, soaked in clauses and voided agreements, as a single paper crane wearing bifocals fluttered by and muttered, "You missed the trial." He hadn't known he was on trial, but the pond had already receded, revealing a courtroom made of invisible bricks and forgotten birthday cards. The judge's bench was occupied by a grandfather clock wearing a powdered wig of tangled cassette tape. The jury? 12 unblinking mannequins dressed in whispering wallpaper, each suit stitched with sentences that were never completed. Slade's lawyer was a vacuum cleaner that only sucked in opinions. "Your Honor," it bellowed in Morse code, "the defendant is as guilty as memory allows." The prosecutor, a disembodied top hat spinning slowly on a pedestal, countered by reciting a weather forecast from 1973 in reverse. The judge nodded. The mannequins clapped, though their hands never moved. "Do you even know what I'm being accused of?" Slade shouted, but the room gasped as if he'd confessed to alphabet theft. "You were seen in conversation with the wallpaper," the judge told solemnly. "And you listened." Gasps again. Somewhere a lone clarinet fainted. Before he could object, the floor whispered a verdict into his shoes. "You are neither guilty nor innocent. You are pending." The walls folded inward and became an elevator shaft. He was suddenly rising sideways, the numbers on the panel blinking in Cyrillic laughter. Every floor was labeled "Here." None of them were. The elevator stopped at floor ? The doors opened into a cavern made of dictionaries, stalactites, dripping footnotes. The air smelled like nearly remembered dreams and static. Slade walked carefully, avoiding floor tiles that screamed in lowercase. At the far end of the cave sat a creature, half rotary phone, half librarian, entirely disappointed. It spoke in unfinished crossword puzzles. You sought the truth, it burbled, but you brought logic. Slade held out the photograph of the squirrel and the cassette tape. It burst into glitter and became a compass, spinning wildly, and then stopping. "North," said the creature, but only metaphorically. Suddenly, the compass spun again and pointed toward a curtain made of eyelids. Slade pulled it back. Behind it was the original room, the one with the wallpaper. But it had changed. It pulsed with awareness, each swirl vibrating like an anxious cello string. The patterns moved now, faster than thought. They formed faces, then rooms, then entire cities, then a memory. Not his, but one the wallpaper had borrowed. A young boy staring at a ceiling full of constellations that rearranged into song lyrics. A dog reciting poems to a fence. A window that refused to forget the things it had seen. Slade touched the wall. The wallpaper sighed. The room folded into itself, collapsing into a single sheet of lined paper. On it, a single sentence. Truth is just the loudest fiction in the room. He folded the paper, placed it in his coat, walked out the door. But the hallway had been replaced with a subway platform, and trains roared by, filled with alternate versions of himself. One playing the violin with a swordfish, another arguing with a toaster in fluent binary, another simply blinking. He chose not to board. Instead, he walked into the tunnel, barefoot, because the shoes had left without him. At the end of the tunnel was a mirror. Again, but this one reflected everything except Slade. It reflected his choices, his questions, the room, the wallpaper, you. And as he stood there watching himself not exist, a final whisper curled into his mind. You were never meant to solve this, just to ask it. The mirror cracked into exactly 7 dreams, and the last one floated into the sky, where the clouds were finally done arguing and had become a single, satisfied asterisk. He smiled and disappeared between the question and the answer.